our next guest who is going to be joining us. He is the older brother of the late Tom Cole, who was one of the key whistleblowers in 1992 that really led to charge that I think led to what we saw on Wednesday in terms of this filing. Lee Cole is joining us from the Wrestling with the Devil YouTube channel. Lee, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Lee.
Yeah, how you doing? And I apologize. I'm in the car and I can't figure out my browser to show my face. Maybe that's a good thing.
No, as long as we can hear you, you're coming in perfectly clear.
Are you wearing a Yankees hat?
I sure am. That's why I wanted to show my face. I got my Yankee hat on. I got my gear on. I even went out and bought a nice shirt that fits me, a Yankee shirt.
Okay.
It's a big thing.
It all goes down Friday night, game one.
Yes, it does.
Well, Lee, I mean, this has been a long road to Wednesday's filing, and I just want to ask you off the top, a day removed from this lawsuit finally coming out, and probably a lot of people either learning about the Ring Boy scandal for the first time or truly understanding like how dark this gets. For you, just when this finally got filed, were you? I'm sure you've been just a roller coaster of emotions when it comes to this story that is so intrinsically tied to you and your family.
Yeah, the biggest thing is that we always knew it was very dark, but people didn't want to accept that part. And I guess with the eyewitnesses coming forward now and telling their stories, the big thing is, Lee Cole's behind this. Lee Cole's gotten people to do this and that. Well, the reality is this: Lee Cole did not get 5 people to come forward and tell their story about what happened with Mel Phillips. These are men that had their stories. They've been holding them in. Sure, you can open the door for people, but they still have to tell their stories. And it's one thing Tom used to always say: they could say whatever they want to me, but in the end, they can never say I wasn't telling the truth.
And going back to 1992, tell me when you first learn of Mel Phillips and the context of which who he was described to you. And for context, like your brother Tom, he worked at the WWF. I hope I have my dates right here, between 1985 and 1990, which is when he is propositioned by Terry Garvin and is let go by the company, and then comes back in 1992. So my understanding would be around 1992 is when you first hear of what went down with Tom.
Well, I was in Utica, and Tom was a street guy, and sometimes he needed a place to lay his head, and he came in, and I remember talking to him. I said, Tom, why don't you talk to me about wrestling anymore? And because Tom was always talking about wrestling, he was always happy about wrestling, and he was kind of depressed. And then he sat down, and it's like a couple days he didn't want to tell me, and then he sat down and started telling me the story. And when he told me the story, I was shocked, angry, and that's where it started. It started right there in that house on Knox Street in Utica.
And your response to him was what? Like what did you take from that? Like, this is your younger brother, and you see that this trauma that he has clearly gone through. Is it immediate that you feel this needs to be known? Whether what are the channels you seek out to get the story?
Well, the reality is that Phil Muchnick did a story, and it's kind of funny now. These guys are blaming, Phil Muchnick. They had this clown attack him the other day on the show. The fact of the matter is, I'm going to tell you something right now, and if people don't know Phil Muchnick is a damn good man. Phil Muchnick has put this stuff out there back during the times when nobody wanted to hear it. And wrestlers that are attacking Phil Muchnick, what they need to remember is Phil Muchnick is the one that came out and said, wait a minute, these guys are independent contractors. Wait a minute, these guys don't have insurance. Wait a minute, these guys are being sexually abused by Pat Patterson, and they can't go to work, and they're being harassed by Patterson or Garvin. Instead, you have these wrestlers that are around now, especially the ones with the show, that still want to kiss Vince McMahon's ass, not realizing what Phil Muchnick did for them. He's the one that opened the door. Phil Muchnick and my brother, those were the originals. Those were the 2 guys that opened the store.
When you kind of going through the lawsuit, Lee, and I'm sure like you are on top of this as much as anyone. Just the fact that a lot of the public is seeing the allegations in gruesome detail outlined. I'm sure this is stuff that privately you've people have confided in you of what they have gone through, and I'm kind of curious just what you have made of the reaction to this suit in the past 24 hours, and why you feel it's going to be handled differently today versus 3 decades ago, where it just felt the public and the media really did not know how to cover this story.
Well, and just to be fair to the media, back then, when my brother decided to go back to work because he was misrepresented by his lawyer during the meetings, there was a stack of shows on the table. And I remember the lawyer saying to me, "Look at this! All these people want Tom on." What Tom should have done when Vince McMahon got up in that meeting and threatened to walk out, Tom's lawyer should have said, "Well, we'll see you on TV tomorrow." But he didn't do that. And so at that moment, people were in the room with Vince, Linda McMahon and Jerry McDevitt, overwhelming figures. It was this city lawyer living off his father's name. He was a horrible lawyer. And this whole thing started with a small town lawyer. And these lawyers that you got now, this is what they do. They specialize in sexual abuse victims. They have money to back them. Vince McMahon cannot outspend them like he has done. That's what he did with Munchnick. He got it squashed for 2 years. Munchnick couldn't talk, and he used money to squash this. If he doesn't shut down Munchnick back then, it would have got a lot worse. But Jerry McDevitt was a brilliant lawyer and knew exactly what to do, and they shut up, and they shut up Munchnick.
Yeah, and you're referring to the lawsuit. We understand there's a letter that Tom Cole's lawyer sends to WWE with this basically a draft of a complaint, but that lawsuit ends up not getting filed, correct?
Made. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you.
Yeah, there were so many mistakes made. I mean, back then, we were a couple of street kids, and we didn't know what we were stepping into or how powerful these people were. It's like the mistakes made back then were incredible, and if it was done at a different time, or maybe I was a little bit more clever or smarter, a lot of things would not have happened. But the first time I seen Vince McMahon, you see this figure and you say, "Oh, look at him! He's an impressive guy." And for 2 days, he bullshits me. The third day, we're at each other's throat. But it's really tough. It's like once you know things now, that if I, you ever hear that saying, if I knew then what I know now.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, I don't. There were so many mistakes made by everybody involved in this: Tom, me, Phil Munchnick, and they were going up against Jerry McDevitt, who's a brilliant lawyer.
Would it be fair to characterize, Lee, that when you and your brother are brought to Titan Towers, are you sort of viewed by them as the obstacle here to get to Tom? And
yeah, what happened is they kept me out of the meeting when they first came into New York. They kept me out of that meeting, and then right after the meeting, Tom told Vince, "Oh, my brother is involved in this," and so Vince says, "Oh, your brother." And so at that time, they decided to invite me to the Phil Donahue show, and that's where I originally met Vince McMahon. And for 2 days, I thought he was a great guy until he broke into my answering machine and did some things when I was sitting there. And as people know, back then I had a felony warrant out for my arrest. So I was like on the edge of my seat. I'm like, damn, man, if these guys find out I have a felony warrant, they're going to have me arrested. And they eventually had me arrested anyway, and it backfired on them. But, it's like I said, it's all these crazy things going on. And when Vince knew there was somebody else, sure, it bothered him. Because I remember when Vince went into the answering machine, then he told me, he looked at me and he said to me, "Oh, you're a smart one, aren't you?" But he said it sarcastically. I'll always remember his face, the way he frowned when he said it to me. That was just Vince, I guess.
And Lee, in the last almost year or so, you've been doing a lot of work on your YouTube channel, and you've had
Yeah.
former ring boys on your YouTube channel to talk with you, which was the first time that these people were talking in public. And do you think that had any role in causing this lawsuit to come about, or do you have any involvement in helping getting this going?
I'm not going to talk about that right now, unfortunately, because it's, whatever they decide to do, somewhere along the line, they're going to blame me for it. But the fact of the matter is, these boys came forward. They told the truth. They're telling the truth. If I had one ring boy on, and they came to me. They sent me emails and they told me that their stories, and that's it. And I just operated as a show. I had nothing to do with the lawsuit.
When people have come forward to you, Lee, I mean, it's like, this is obviously very traumatic for them, and I'm just kind of curious for you, how you're able to convey to them like a certain level of, like, I think for a lot of these victims, it's simply people believing them, and that concern of coming forward and all that comes with it. Like, I'm sure these people are going to be smeared, and I think you were at least able to instill with them, like, you can trust me by sharing your story, and they obviously had that confidence in you.
Yes, and something, and we get back to the smearing part. I seen some shows last night. They should be ashamed of themselves. One guy said that he had a child, and then he started making fun of what happened to the ring boys along with his audience. So these are avid wrestling fans that think the world is based on some kind of play, or whatever they call it in wrestling. And I think the one good thing about me and being involved in this is I like wrestling, but I'm not some avid wrestling fan. I never looked at this as like an avid wrestling fan thing. I looked at this as like pedophiles being allowed in the company by the two owners, and they knew that they were pedophiles, and they never did anything to stop it. Until the only reason they ever stopped it was because Tom's lawsuit came out. And another thing that bothers me is the fact that I was watching Dave Meltzer. Dave Meltzer did a show today, and once again, he's talking about this. Well, Dave, every time that a story comes out in this, you jump on the bandwagon. Why? Here's a guy that had a lot of over the years. He's pretty big in the wrestling world. And the only time he ever talked about it is when it got out there. And this is the problem. We have very few David Bixens's fans, and David Bixens's fans. And I'm just going to say this: he's a credit to people that are investigators. He investigated it for a long time. And if everybody else in the wrestling world, instead of being wrestling fans, especially you, Dave Meltzer, were investigators, this would have turned out a lot different.
I will say that, like, with Dave Meltzer, I mean, Tom Cole did appear on his show several times, and I'm kind of curious as well of what you observed through Tom over the last number of years. Like, how much did he stay connected to wrestling, and, like, was it something that that you observed was something he continued to battle, these horrific experiences that he underwent?
It got worse as he got older, just like some of these ring boys that have come out. You're a man, you're growing up, and Tom created a family. He became a bodyguard, had a great job. But something, when you suffer things that through molestation as a child, whether you're a man or a woman, it lives in you forever. And anybody that's out there that's a victim of molestation, I'm sure they know what I'm talking about. People act like, why are these guys coming forward now? Well, because one, they were raising families. They didn't want their children to know men have a machismo about them, and they don't want people to know that this happened to them when they were children. And some of these men are very tough men that you would not mess with on the street. These are street guys. These are street kids. They were street kids that were taken advantage of by Mel. And my brother stayed close to wrestling until probably his daughters were born, and then he kind of started getting away from it. But toward the end of his life, between his brain tumor in the last year and a half, it bothered him more than ever. And he started talking about it a lot. Like, he got a hold of, he spoke to Dave a couple times. He spoke to a few people in the wrestling world. And then when when the Pat Patterson came out, and it came out that Pat Patterson did a show where he said he was gay, and they were praising him and everything, but everybody always knew Pat Patterson was gay. That was not new. It was just another work. And that really bothered Tom, because Tom knew all the things that Pat Patterson was doing. And to this day, Pat Patterson still gets a pass because people don't want to believe what he did, even though we have like maybe 30, 40 people that said he did this stuff.
Including the Netflix documentary, Tony Atlas
Yes.
an allegation of being groped by
Yes.
Patterson. Would you tell for our audience, you said it many times publicly, but our audience might not have heard it, your conversations with Tom about getting justice basically for alleged abuse?
Well, the last day my brother was alive, and I got texts too. I put texts up on my show to show it. He sent me texts originally, and then I was concerned about him, and I called him, and we were talking on the phone for about 2 hours. And he told me, he said, "Lee, let everybody know what these people did to me." And I remember saying to him, and I got the proof in the text too. I said to him in the text, "Tom, what more can we do? No one's listening no more." And Tom said to me, he says, "Lee, if I know you, and if you keep it up, I know that something will happen." I never thought anything was going to happen. When I came on the YouTube, I went into the mob genre. I had built a successful show there. And the reason I came back here was because of Janelle Grant. Janelle Grant's show came out. He was being abused by so many people. Right away, they don't want to believe her. They'll say, "Oh, she took the money," and all that stuff, but they don't understand what being a victim is. And every victim acts different. And the reason I came back to this was because of Janelle Grant. Vince's biggest mistake, and Vince, I don't know if you listen to this, but that woman was the biggest mistake you ever made. He got greedy, he got stupid, and he just opened up the door. Vince self-destructed. And now it's only going to get worse. I'm sure more ring boys are coming forward. And believe me, I know they're coming forward. His own worst enemy brought himself down. And we have to thank Janelle Grant for opening that door. No matter what people think of Janelle Grant, he's responsible for opening this door.
Can you tell us a bit about whether your direct dealings, or especially with Tom's, in regards to Linda McMahon and why she is included as a defendant in this as well?
Linda McMahon is the master of the cover-up. What Vince did is Vince walked out of the boardroom that very last day when everybody was meeting there, and he said, "Linda, take over." Linda took over. Linda was in charge of my brother. Linda was in charge of covering up the Ring Boy scandal. Linda was in charge of going out and finding people. She was part of it, just like she was part of so many other cover-ups. And then it went to the daughter, Stephanie, covering up for Ashley Massaro. This is what they've done over the years. What gets me? This company has done and damaged and hurt so many people. And it takes this lawsuit to open up some eyes. And it's always been out there. This should have been stopped years ago. It's like I said, the feds dropped the ball in 1992 because Mel went out and was telling the kids, "Hey, the feds are involved in this. Please do, if they come talking to you, don't mention anything." And one of the victims had all these pictures. He had a videotape. And if the FBI went and questioned him in 1992, they would have been able to bust open the whole entire Ring Boy scandal back then. But they dropped the ball. And these are the little stories along the line of who dropped the ball here.
It really seems like they were, for some reason, not interested in pursuing allegations of sexual abuse against children, and instead went for the steroid scandal and the steroid distribution claims, which seem a lot weaker. But yeah.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, all they had to do was go look for those kids, and they didn't. I had one of the Ring Boys tell me, he goes, "Lee, I had everything. I had the pictures. I had everything. If they came and knocked on my door and they said, 'Oh, we want to see these,' do you think that young man was going to say no to the FBI? No." And But you know what? Being in the mob genre. One thing I learned about the feds, they drop the ball on a lot of things.
When it comes to, ring boys you have been in contact with, and you don't have to be specific at all, of course, do you see, like, are NDAs part of a reason that some of these ring boys can't come forward? Like, it was that sort of in the strategy of making these stories go away?
Well, one thing we learned over the years, MDAs mean nothing. They're useless. Vince McMahon tried to make them mean something. They really don't mean anything. Anybody can break an MDA. And if someone breaks an MDA, and you're not going to go after them, because if you go after them, then they're going to talk about why they got their mouth shut. And that's the whole thing going on right now with the Janelle Grant thing and that fielding for it. Yeah. So but they may try it. They wanted me to sign one in '92, and I told Vince to go to hell when he wanted me to sign one right there in the office. There was no way I was going to do that, because that meant I couldn't talk about anything. But people do sign them, and people give them a lot more power than they are. They really don't have no power.
What are you looking for, Lee, that hopefully is the outcome here? Like, what are you seeking? Is this a labor of love for your brother? Is this just justice for these ring boys, and ultimately responsibility being laid at those that allowed this to go unchecked for all these years?
Oh, well, something, you have people who have emotionally are a wreck. Mm-hmm. People whose lives went in different directions because of what happened to them because of the WWE. And it happened to them because people say, oh, why? The new one is, why is TKO being sued? Because one, TKO merged and they took that entity of the WWE. And here's what people seem to forget, which is amazing. TKO, when you make a merger, a multi-billion-dollar merger, the first thing you do is send in all your investigators, and you see everything. They knew about all these things being signed by that, Vince buying everybody off in 22. They knew about it. And then they came in, and 7 days later, Vince is gone. So it's obvious they knew. So they're not an innocent victim in this. They knew exactly what was going on when they purchased the company. So you know what? This becomes part of the company. Welcome to the WWE. You just merged with it. So now you got to take on all their problems. That's what people have to understand. I'm figuring this is most likely why TKO has been put into this lawsuit.
I would think, if nothing else, they're the parent company of WWE. These allegations,
yeah,
these allegations
exactly.
happened at the WF's venues, happened in the course of Mel Phillips hiring ring boys. So it was part of the business.
And it's going to be interesting to see if the WWE, if they're smart, what they would do is they would say, look, we're trying to move on in this world. We don't want no part of this man. We know this man did all this. We know his wife was involved in this. We want to part from all this and do the right thing. That would be the smartest thing. But nobody knows what anybody's going to do in the middle of a lawsuit. This is going to wind up between a bunch of lawyers negotiating and everything. I hope that these kids get taken care. Well, these former children get taken care of for the suffering that they've gone through in their life, and the horrible. You read some of that horrible stuff. Mm-hmm. Everybody always thought this was about foot on crotch. And, this was about a guy using a foot to get it to the crotch. And that's what it was about. And Mel was doing so. I believe that Mel Phillips may have been the most prolific pedophile in the history of this country. That is what I believe. I believe that he used the WWE and championship belts and all that stuff as props and carrots to lure these victims in. And I believe by the time this is all over, we are going to all learn what a prolific pedophile this man was. And more and more people come through, the doors are going to open up wider, and everybody's going to learn about Mel Phillips and why the hell did Vince and Linda let that man? What did this guy have on Vince? This guy had something on Vince McMahon. Mel Phillips was released for 6 weeks in 1988. 6 weeks. And then Vince brought him back and said, stay away from the boys.
That's what that's what hits me so much in this lawsuit, Lee, is that you see this pattern of Mel that would literally just like drive into these neighborhoods and strike up conversations with children. And like, we don't hear too much about Mel Phillips post 1992, but that's 20 years after the fact. Like, here was a guy that had a black book with children from all areas of the country, that had access to video recording equipment. I mean, I don't dismiss your theory, like, of how deep this goes, and that line in the suit about this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And part of this complaint, it describes, it's almost like the stereotype of the guy driving around in the creepy van, like, but he's got championship belts to lure the kids.
Yes, and he rents cars, he rents vans. I found out so much about this man in the last year. It's incredible. You got to remember, though, this is the man that went on flights and took these boys out of the country. What else is it? Did he do things to boys out of the country? He spent a lot of time in Hawaii. He spent a lot of time in England. What went on there?
And then the advent of the internet, like, who knows what was like with that tool at your disposal. Like, again, he's alive till 2012. Like God knows what was what we don't know. That's what I come to a conclusion asking. Yeah,
and it's a sad story. It's very sad because now the families are finding out things. These guys have said, "Look, this happened to me," and they're like, "Wow, this happened to you." You've seen that picture of Mel laying on top of a boy. Mm-hmm. Now that boy's 13 years old, and then you'll have morons in here go, "But they were wrestling." Okay, so you had a 40-year-old man laying on top of a 13-year-old boy wrestling. Is that what you're going to say he was doing? Are you that stupid? And unfortunately, you do have a lot of stupid people in the wrestling genre.
And I think just being as brazen as it's outlined, that this was not as though this was only happening behind closed doors. Like, he had no shame in terms of, wrestling with these boys in plain view of the wrestlers, Pat Patterson,
all of them.
And it was almost as though, like, you're creating this culture that, like, this is normalized. Like, that's just Mel Phillips. This is this weird quirk he has. And you're observing, like, abuse, like, right in front of your eyes.
Yeah, it's like Jesse Ventura walked up to my brother Tom and said, "Be careful of that man." Mm-hmm. And then people will say, "Oh, but why didn't they step forward?" And, that is a good question, to be fair. But at that time, these are guys that most of these guys didn't have a pot to piss in. They were making $20 to do a wrestling show, and they didn't want to be blackballed. Bruno can come forward because he's Bruno. But, look what they did to Bruno in the end. He came back at the end only because of Triple H. But what they did to him at the end of his, that's another thing, too, which gets me. Has Vince McMahon ever been loyal to anybody that's ever made him a lot of money? Bruno, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, just about everybody that's made him a lot of money, he's done something really bad to. So if he does bad things to those people, what makes you think that he's not going to do bad things to people that mean nothing to him?
Yeah, I'd also add, like, just like studying a lot on this, is that a common trait you hear from a lot of, like, victims of sexual abuse is that, as traumatizing as the actual abuse is, for some it is as traumatic to come forward and not to be believed either. And
yes,
that turns a lot of people off from going public. So I encourage everyone to remember that, of people that really have very little to gain by coming forward and putting themselves in the public discourse and knowing what is going to come their way. It's a real ugly side of these stories, and that's very traumatic for these people too.
And I can tell everybody here, I get attacked all the time in here. I get attacked by wrestlers. I get attacked by people. You had to see some of these chats, what they said about me last night, saying that I put this. Who the fuck am I? Excuse my language. I'm sorry. Who the hell am I? Seriously, who am I? I'm just a guy with a show. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not at the level of these guys. What do you think? Lawyers are going to magically you think these guys are going to spend all this money and take on a multi-billion four people? 4 entities worth $1 billion. No, they're going to do it only if they think they're in the right. And they are in the right. They know they have the right. Like, you see a couple pictures. What do you think? They only got a couple pictures? It's like, oh, wait, when we get to court, we'll show you the juicy ones. And it's like, okay, what do you think? There's no videos around? It's a funny thing. And they're all going to think about that. I'm sure you guys have just seen the tip of the iceberg and not the iceberg.
Yeah, Lee has seen much more of the iceberg, I think, than most. Lee, we'll end it off on this. And I know this is probably a difficult question, but if you can imagine how Tom would have felt today with this coming forward, can you put yourself into that headspace of how he would feel? Because I'm sure he was very dissuaded over the years that this sort of was, a horrific part of WWE's history that they navigated themselves out of, and almost just it became this part of history that enough people moved on from and didn't reflect enough upon.
Well, it's unfortunate. Sometimes in the history of the world, people have to die in order for things to get accomplished. And my brother died. And, so did other people, Ashley Massaro, and horrible, committing suicide. And I think about it because Ashley Massaro and Tom and Janelle Grant are all part of this club where they were abused, called liars. They were always liars. And it's because of those people that were here that we are now. I'm just a small part of this. Those guys were the big parts. And those are the people everybody should look up to, especially those 3 people. Tom Cole, Ashley Massaro, and Janelle Grant, to me, are the heroes in this.
And for those that are listening as well, maybe learning about this story, tell us where we can hear more. I'm sure you're going to be covering this very in depth over the next days and weeks, and where they can follow you.
I got a show dropping on Dave Meltzer today. I'm sorry, Dave, but I had no choice. And you're going to get a lot of people doing stories on this, but then you're going to get the guys that I call them the bandwagon guys, or the jumping on the riding people's coattails. It's nothing wrong with doing that, but report on the story and report the truth, and that's what separates David Bixenspan from 90% of the guys in here reporting on this. It's like, there's a lot of stuff out there, guys. If you go look for it, you'll find it. If a little uneducated shit like me can do it, you sure the hell can do it, guys. I'm not talking to you guys. I know you guys are always on it. But everybody should do their job and look, talk to people. Don't assume that Pat Patterson's innocent because people like him. That's basically what I would say about this.
Well, Lee, we thank you for joining us. You've been following this, for decades at this point. We appreciate you joining us, and we will be continuing to follow this story. And we thank you very much for jumping on and being generous with your time today.
Oh, good job, guys. You guys always put out the facts, and you talk to both sides. And I'm sure you guys are going to see this is going to get quite uglier, and I'm sure they're going to come after certain people pretty soon. So let's do it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Lee. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Take care.